foreign, predatory, parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanised to make way for wind turbines, or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. Well, g'day and happy weekend coming up. Oh, everyone's happy about that. What a stumbling, awkward entrance I just made. But anyway, that's the way it is. It's Friday and I'm buggered. This is the weekly wrap-up from the only opposition party in Australia, the only party serving the Australian people, the sensible party we've been called. I want to start with some good news. The people of Gympie, the Gympie Shire, the Gympie Council, have voted to stop putting fluoride in their water. And I want to thank and acknowledge all the people who are involved. I understand it was a team effort. Alona Lana, councillor from one of the divisions in Gympie, notified me, and my wife and I were absolutely delighted. So there's a team behind it. It's not just Alana. But so, thank you so much to the people of Gympie, the councillors at Gympie and the Gympie Shire Council. Wonderful news, wonderful, wonderful news. You're not the first, but just keep going. Also want to thank, so there's an example of citizens being active in democracy at a local council level, but also their vote will have consequences across the state as more and more people join to get rid of fluoride from their water supply. The next point I wanted to make, I'm starting off with good news today because there are so many things that need to be addressed in our country that I find it interesting to have good news. Australians for Better Government organised a conference for that topic, Australians for Better Government. And they held it in Southport a few weeks ago and it was very well attended, sold out, several speakers, and I was invited to speak there and I spoke and got a standing ovation. So thank you very much and thank you for the organisers. Let's see, Kevin Lockray, Stephen Tripp, Katie McCullum, and I'm sure I'll offend people by not mentioning their names because I don't know you all, but thank you so much for organising that, Australians for Better Government. It's, in a true democracy, people need to be actively involved, not just voting, not just scrutineering the elections and volunteering in the election process, but especially holding politicians accountable right through the term they're in Parliament, and making sure they're on our tail, not only voting but also visiting the offices of the senators and MPs, your local MP, state and federal, holding them accountable, telephoning them, writing them letters, paper letters, and just holding them accountable. Keep us on our toes. And then I was invited back to speak at the Let's Rethink Renewables. I've got that right? Yes, Let's Rethink Renewables. What a horrific, fantastic day in Southport again. Similar people organise it. Stephen Tripp, number one, I think. Katie McCullum, and isn't she doing a great job? But these people organised some fabulous speakers, and the messages that came through from that, I spoke at that one, just the horrific cost of solar and wind, the financial cost, the social cost, the community cost, the environmental destruction and mayhem being caused, the rural cost, the regional cost. There is no way that solar and wind make any sense whatsoever unless you're in the boonies, well and truly off the grid. But at the moment it's connected to the grid, it wrecks the grid. So let's rethink renewables. Great job. Oh, and how could anyone who's seen Trump's speech not be very, very thrilled with Donald Trump's speech to the UN? Didn't he tell them what for? And he built several key points. He said, first of all, the UN is behind the mass immigration. I've been saying that for years, leading the way in that in Australia. And it's very important to be vindicated, because he pointed out the $350 million that the UN had spent to provide credit cards to some of these illegal immigrants pouring over the border, and supporting them in so many ways and breaking the law. So the UN is actively driving it, and that was great to see. He called it mass invasion, and the UN is supposed to be stopping wars, and here it is peddling an invasion, supporting and driving an invasion, destroying America's sovereignty, or trying to. So that was just fantastic to hear Donald Trump. And then he built the cat. He said climate is a scam. The climate change claims are a scam, a complete scam. And he also said that solar and wind are horribly destructive. No more wind turbines going up in America under his regime. So that was fantastic. And he made many other points. And we'll finish with a very amusing video. Speaking of solar and wind and the energy transition, the energy nightmare, the energy suicide note, EVs draining to the grid. I've got an article to show you. Electric car owners can have the opportunity to sell the power from their EV batteries, from their home batteries, back to the grid. So some people have tried selling the charge in their electric vehicle back to the grid already. They've been on trial. Guess how much they made on the charge back? $1.16. Presumably that's kilowatt per kilowatt hour. But guess how much it costs you to fill that battery from the grid? $18. What a deal! You pay for the car, you pay for the battery, and it acts as a free backup for the government. They can tap into it, and they'll pay you $1.16 per unit, and it costs you $18 to make. What a scam, what a furphy. And the government is making out that that's it there to help you. They're just ripping you off. It just doesn't make sense. So what's really going on? I covered that in a speech to Parliament recently, so have a listen to that.
Billions of dollars in technologies Australians clearly don't want and are environmentally reprehensible. The answer may lie in the plans for Australia's energy grid. The government needs electric vehicles hooked up to the grid under their plans for consumer energy resources like EV batteries to be connected to virtual power plants. They want to use your car as a battery. The government can't afford to build all the batteries needed under their net zero plan. They don't even know how much. There's no plan. So the government wants Australians to buy an EV with a battery that can be taken over and discharged to the grid. They don't tell you that, do they? But that's what they're wanting. The Australian Renewable Energy Agency says this, quote, can help stabilise the power grid, batteries that is, from EVs, can help stabilise the power grid by supplying power back during times of high demand. End of quote. There it is. Do you hear that in their advertisements? No. Like many things, this will start off as a voluntary scheme currently called bi-directional charging or vehicle to grid. Sounds good, but think about what it means. It means stealing your electricity when you want it. Then the inevitable threat of blackouts and instability of the electricity grid under net zero will become an emergency, and everyone with an EV will be forced to participate. And then, so what we've got now is power shortages in some states as they destroy perfectly good coal, gas generation and try to replace it with solar and wind and fail to replace it. So we've got a shortage of electricity, shortage of reliable electricity. And now they want to convert the car fleet, the transport fleet, to EVs, to add more demand to the electricity sector. Then they want to promote artificial intelligence, which is an electricity hub. And then they want to support Bitcoin mining. Where is all this going to lead? Massive sky prices, shortages, unreliability and instability and insecurity.
All of these net zero making you pay more, controlling energy, which is what I've said from the start, controlling energy so that they can raise the price and control everything you do. And that's why they're moving from gas to electricity. You're trying to convert you onto electricity so they can control you, smart meters, etc. They're all, these net zero tricks are about making you pay more. Remember, only one nation is committed to ending net zero so that we can put more money back in your pocket. Only one nation. And we've started the fire in the Liberal Party and the National Party because they realise that people are waking up as a result of what we're saying. So now some of the Liberals and some of the Nationals are actually trying to fight within their party to stop net zero. About bloody time. Right, let's move on to the next topic. Afab Malik is a British-born migrant to Australia of Pakistani origins. And this, by the way, I'll continue with it. He was named as the Special Envoy to combat Islamophobia last year. He has a report into Islamophobia in Australia, which makes far-reaching, expensive recommendations, hideous recommendations, including Sharia law. The report fails to mention Sharia, yet it is simply not possible to consider the role of Islam in Australia without talking about Sharia law, especially as the author lectured in Sharia. It's in my Substack, and it's also on my website, a longer version on my website and a shorter version on Substack. The report also does not mention ISIS or Hamas, although it defends Palestine frequently. How can you defend Palestine without acknowledging the actions of Hamas? By dismissing anti-Islam sentiments as Islamophobia, the report fails to take any responsibility for the horrors committed against other religions at the hands of Islam. This is not a balanced report, it's a one-sided report. And we, the taxpayer, paid for it. We, the taxpayer, paid for it, a report into Islamophobia. And it's just purely pushing Islam and suppressing other religions. Violence against Christians by Islamists rose 60% since 2023, with 380 million Christians facing high or extreme persecution globally in 2025. Many in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, saw 16.2 million Christians displaced by jihadists. The only religion under most attack in our world is Christianity. That is without a doubt. In the last 2 years, Islamists have murdered between 40,000 and 55,000 Christians in sub-Saharan Africa. Many of these Christians have sought safe harbour in Australia. Is it Mr. Malik's position these people should not be able to talk about their lived experience of religious persecution, rape and murder of family members by Islamic fighters? Is that their position? That's what they're doing. They're trying to set up misinformation and disinformation about religion and nail people who dare to go against the narrative. And of course, nobody mentioned October 7th or the Yazidi genocide. Survivors' lived experience on this link. You can see it below. This link is from the UN Human Rights Council. Malik went all the way back to 9/11 to talk about acts by Islamists, only to complain acts like this give rise to a good Muslim, bad Muslim dichotomy. The report combines all shades of Islam into a single entity with offending opinions requiring rectification. So if you did go against it, you're up for rectification. What a chilling word to use, rectification. In effect, Mr. Malik is using peaceful Muslims as human shields for Islamic terrorists. That's what he's doing. This report demands the federal government roots out any impediment to the expansion of Islam in Australia. I'll say that again. This report demands the federal government roots out any impediment to the expansion of Islam in Australia. I read my staff summary of the report and it is horrific. This is what our taxes are paying for in this country. The report also calls for taxpayers' money to be spent indoctrinating and compromising our entire society: education, judiciary, legislature, policing, media, communications, and even sport to advance Islam. To advance Islam. This is a repetition of what's happening in the UK and in other countries. One Nation opposes all the recommendations and any others from any source which seeks to divide Australia by race or religion. We are one community, we are one nation, and our laws must protect all of us equally. Have a look at my article and have a look at the Substack as well. Okay, speaking of censorship, we move to one of our repeat offenders, the eSafety Commissar, online safety and Elon Musk specifically. The under-16 internet ban, the under-16 social media ban is set to come into force in December this year here in Australia, and it's following on from Britain and other countries around the world. It's a global push to censor people, misinformation, disinformation, prevent access to under-16s, in theory to keep people safe, keep children safe. What in reality it means, if you want to visit a site that's approved for people above 16, older than 16, you'll have to disclose your identity, biometric identity, facial recognition. And if you want to keep using it, then you have to stay there, so the camera will be locked on the whole time. But think about some of the things. I'll discuss some of the things that'll bring into the children under 16. How can you fine companies, though, for failing to comply with age verification technology that doesn't work? How can you do that? That's what Elon Musk is whinging about, and he's correct. The December start date will likely cause a substantial disruption to the Australian digital landscape, right on Christmas, when struggling businesses rely on social media to survive against international competitors. This is insane. So it's commercially insane. It's hurting 16. Some people under 16 have an internet business based upon YouTube, and they're making good money, and they're doing their research. And this is just insane. The anti-business Labor Party never took into consideration when picking an implementation date for one of the most disruptive digital policies in the world. This goes beyond. Some people say it's leading. Some of the Albanese's claims are that it's leading the world. We know that parts of Europe were taken offline entirely by social media companies in protest against similar legislation. What does that do to an Australian business here in Australia? Does Albanese care? From what I've seen, he cares not a jot about workers, not including the staff in my office, just reaching in and firing them. Did the eSafety Commissar even ask the question? The ban has been extended to cover Roblox, Lego Play, Discord, Stream and Twitch, Pinterest, Kik, GitHub, HubApp, Tinder and OkCupid will have to prove their exemption. As for X, formerly Twitter, Elon Musk says, and I'm going to quote, just lost the screen. Can you blow up the size? Elon Musk, quote, "We have serious concerns as to the lawfulness of social media minimum age, including its compatibility with other regulations and laws, including international human rights treaties to which Australia is a signatory. We are especially concerned about the potential negative impact that the social media minimum age will have on the human rights of children and young people." Children have rights, including their rights to freedom of expression and access to information, principles which are enshrined in international treaties, including the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and which must be protected. They're not thinking this through. No, maybe they have thought it through. They want to restrict people's rights in this country. Remember, social media are not publications, they're platforms. Their legal equivalent is the town square. That's why social media is quite often called the digital town square. Those places protect freedom of speech and association for everyone, including children under 16 years of age. Less than 1% of Australian social media users are under 16. Less than 1%. So we're forcing 99% to comply with the restrictions to protect, in the name of protecting the 1%. 100% of Australian social media users stand to have their digital, biological and privacy rights infringed by this legislation. I'll say that again. 100% of Australian social media users stand to have their digital, biological and privacy rights infringed by this legislation. And we can thank the Greens and the Labor Party. We can thank Scott Morrison's Liberal Party for developing it in the first place. Is social media really to blame for the problems cited by the eSafety Commissar? If 99% of children are not on social media, then probably not. The government has no problem with saturating the education system with political rhetoric and moulding children into activism, even going so far as to allow their teachers to drag them out of school for rallies, but heaven forbid kids that learn something that contradicts this online. Maybe that's the point. Labor wants kids to vote at 16, a day after they have access to the internet. Elon Musk said, and I'm going to quote from Elon Musk again, "Seems like a backdoor way to control access to the internet by all Australians." He's nailed it. Backdoor, and also not just internet access, but everything about our lives, can monitor us, social credit system. We've been predicting this, and Scott Morrison put a suite together, Labor, and he introduced it into the Parliament. Backdoor, front door. The real question is application of a verification process. And consider the hypocrisy. It's staggering from both the Prime Minister and the European Union, who spoke at the United Nations just in the last few days, saying they want to protect kids from online information, while the streets of their cities, where kids have to walk to school and play, are being made more dangerous by public policy. public policy. Were the streets safer when you were a child? They were certainly safer when I was a child. Why doesn't the government clean up its own backyard first? Children in Victoria are breaking into homes with machetes at 11 years of age. 11. Our problem isn't social media, it's government, the policing system, or the lack of a policing system that's crippled by the woke and the social justice activism of the courts, and by mass immigration. That's what's crippling our country. The White House has announced that due to our oversight efforts, Google commits to offer all creators previously kicked off YouTube due to political speech violations will be returned to the platform. So there's Donald Trump admitting that prior to him coming back into the presidency, people were politically censored. We know that. We know that because Zuckerberg admitted to it. We know it's happened in this country. I've asked questions in Senate estimates about the health department during COVID and the Department of Home Affairs interfering in people's lives. Apple and Google are associated in many ways. Alphabet, the parent company for Google, in an email to the chairman, the Alphabet company said, quote, "It is committed to doing its part to continue to keep the digital ecosystem safe, reliable and open to free expression." He also said, quote, "Transparency regarding government interactions with private platforms is essential for fostering public trust and holding principles of free expression." That's the end of the quote. The reason for the review is an investigation of the COVID era, which was described as unprecedented at the time, and we'll have more to say about that, where platforms had to reach decisions about how to best balance freedom of expression with the responsibility and harm in the real world. In other words, censorship. Look, throughout history, the best people to make the decisions about what to watch and what not to watch, what to say and what not to say, are the people themselves, not censors. Censors have used it to bully people, to kill people. Apart from violent and sexually explicit material against kids, the rest of it should be up to the people to decide what they watch. Platforms during COVID had to reach decisions about how to best balance freedom of expression with the responsibility and harm in the real world. A very similar line to what we are hearing about proposals to moderate misinformation and disinformation on the topic of climate change. Yes, they're having an inquiry right now, made a submission. I've talked about it last week. We might share bits of it again in the future. Alphabet, the owner of Google and YouTube, has come forward and condemned the Biden government. Now they condemn them. See how they're afraid of the government before? Saying it was unacceptable and wrong when any government attempts to dictate how their company moderates content, and the company, that's Alphabet, had consistently fought against those efforts on First Amendment grounds, which is the protection and right of free speech in America. So here's a note for Australia's eSafety Commissar. YouTube has not and will not, this is a quote from Alphabet, YouTube has not and will not empower fact-checkers to take action on or label content across the company's services. Good on you, YouTube. Okay. Now to a story that's going to make your blood boil. Last week I talked about the 100,000 people who are here in this country illegally. They've had their applications rejected. So they're here illegally. Some have committed crime, but for whatever reason, they're here illegally, and I've advocated to have them deported immediately. And I showed you in July the Department of Home Affairs had forcibly deported less than 5 people. Less than 5 people out of 100,000 people have been deported. Well, Arvind Ajay Singh, a Fijian national working in childcare, is accused of a shocking crime against a 4-year-old girl, and he was charged by Queensland police. Then more than 3 years later, as he's awaiting trial, Australia's Federal Home Affairs Department let him leave the bloody country voluntarily as a free man, devastating the victim's family. That poor little girl. The man's accused of raping a 4-year-old. So the only person this government can deport is someone who's about to go to trial for crimes against a 4-year-old girl. This is just unbelievable what's happening to our country. And they let him walk out of the country voluntarily as a free man.
Now the Queensland Police is trying to get him extradited back to Australia to face trial for his alleged crimes against a 4-year-old girl. The government has completely lost control of the immigration program. The floodgates are open and they're just letting in anyone and keeping them here. They should be deporting some of these people, but once if they're under allegations and they're being prosecuted, they should face trial first for the crimes they've committed in this country. And if one of those migrants commits an offence against a child, they're allowed to walk out of the country scot-free before they face their charges. That's inhuman. It's insane. Let's move on to another insane topic, the COVID response. Brett Sutton was the Chief Health Officer for Victoria. And social media this week was alive with talk about former Victorian Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton. In an interview on Neil Mitchell's podcast, Sutton made some admissions that the Victorian and federal response to COVID made mistakes. Well, hallelujah. They made mistakes. That's putting it bloody mildly. His admission was no come-to-Jesus moment, though. Most of the interview consisted of Brett either promoting himself or promoting the government response. The only concessions were on small matters. Elbow bumping was not necessary, he said. Handshakes would have sufficed. Hand sanitizers, he said, have a place, but more useful in hospitals than everyday settings. There's a wonderful article in The Australian documenting that as well. Cleaning groceries wasn't important. And why? Because the virus was spread by breath, which is what we said in the first place. But they told us that it was spread by hard surfaces. So cleaning hard surfaces wasn't necessary. Cleaning groceries wasn't necessary. But Victorians had to go through all this pain. Although Brett Sutton did defend closing schools, acknowledging that while children took a hit, developmental delays, their sacrifice, that was his word, kept elderly safe. And as I pointed out repeatedly during the COVID mismanagement, the COVID fraud, the COVID response, whatever you want to call it, that was the first time that we have seen in any species on this planet the elderly, the young being sacrificed for the elderly. To rationalise the damage done to children in this way is an absolute disgrace. The data shows children lost irreplaceable formative years and behind academically and socially as a result. Brett Sutton made the patently false claim that COVID originated in bats. That's complete crap. As I've said in the Senate repeatedly, hard evidence submitted to the US Congress clearly shows the virus was the product of gain-of-function research, illegal gain-of-function research funded by the US government and conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we know it was conducted illegally at the University of North Carolina in the United States. American funding again. And the president at the time, Barack Obama, was the one who passed a law saying that you cannot do gain of function. But he knew apparently that it was continuing in the country under Anthony Fauci's direction and Peter Daszak. COVID, we know, was man-made, came out of a lab. We know that for a fact. There've been many peer-reviewed papers documenting that. And all those who COVID harmed can blame the scientists who conducted that illegal gain of function research and who failed to keep their Frankenstein lab virus in the lab. We also know from early on in the COVID response, CSIRO and Senate estimates admitted that they were involved in gain of function research. So thank the CSIRO, taxpayer money again deployed. Finally, Sutton spruiked the vaccines and calls for Australia to cooperate with international efforts to make more mRNA vaccines on a 100-day turnaround. 100-day turnaround? How the hell do you conduct safety testing? How the hell can you assess efficacy on a vaccine in 100 days, most of which is development and production anyway? The answer is you cannot conduct safety testing in 100 days. You cannot conduct efficacy testing in 100 days. Brett Sutton is clearly turning a blind eye to an avalanche of peer-reviewed science showing the COVID vaccine had negative efficacy. It actually reduced your defense against COVID, and it killed more lives than it saved. I'll say that again. COVID injections killed more lives than they saved. With the Albanese government advancing plans for an Australian Centre for Disease Control, there will be much more information coming forward showing how badly these people failed us during COVID and how stupid an idea it is to give them deadly viruses to play with. One Nation has been calling for a royal commission for years now, for actually 2 years. It's time to get these people into the witness box, into the dock,
or surely they'll do it again. And I've got an article here that I won't go through now, written by Adam Crichton in The Australian. He's now with the Institute of Public Affairs. What a wonderful young man he is. He wrote strongly about energy. He wrote strongly about mass migration. He wrote strongly about COVID from the start of this COVID fraud. You can have a look at Adam's writing. It's wonderful. Now we move on to more health matters. This week, President Trump made an announcement regarding the link between Tylenol, which in Australia we know as Panadol, and the link between that drug and autism. It's a complicated topic, which I won't be covering today, but there is one warning I did want to make really clearly. As a result of what could only be called left-wing women in America, they're taking handfuls of Tylenol to prove that it's safe, and some of them are winding up in hospital. Some of them are pregnant. This is really stupid. Trump derangement syndrome. This is a really stupid thing to do. Panadol is safe for adults when taken according to directions. If you take more than recommended, you risk serious outcomes. There are 1,000 records of adverse events on the Australian Adverse Events Register, DEANS, Database of Adverse Events Notifications, including 40 deaths. Don't be stupid. Take Panadol only as recommended. And if you're pregnant, see your doctor first. This is backed. This is backed by RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr. Tylenol have used social media to advertise that it has not been tested on pregnant women, and it's not recommended for pregnant women. That's what they've admitted themselves. They put out a social media post in 2017 to that effect. So even Tylenol has got problems with it, with its own product. Can I remind people that a child can't take an adult dose of Panadol? Be very careful about the dose you're giving to your child, if you give it anything at all in this drug. Now we come to something a bit lighter. We've had a few heavy topics there. China is now being celebrated by the mainstream. Before I mention this, Anthony Albanese has now gone to a nation-crippling target for solar and wind, renewable energy, of between 60 and 70%, maybe as high as 72%. The Greens want 100%. Let me tell you what China's now going to do. China is using coal, burns more than 50%, more than about 53% of the world's coal use is burned in China. They produce about 8 to 9 times Australia's production. So China has been making solar panels and wind turbines for years now, making 90% of the world's capacity and shipping them overseas and getting subsidised to do that. They're now going to commit to cutting their emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035. But you can't make this stuff up, and the mainstream media is celebrating that. So we're going to cut it by 60 to 70%. Now let's ignore the fact that our Muppets in Australia are aiming for 62 to 70%. The Greens 100%. China says they'll cut 7% from some baseline year. They haven't even told us which baseline year. They just said they'll cut it from a baseline year, so there's no baseline. So China can keep on building coal-fired power plants for the next 10 years while we shoot ourselves in the foot and send all of our manufacturing offshore or into the ruin. You know, the Paris Agreement, many people don't know this. The Copenhagen Conference of Parties in 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. Rudd attended, I remember, with 104 staff, including his own personal barber, hairdresser. Rudd attended that. And what they did was they flew in the presidents, the princes, the prime ministers at the end of the conference. They didn't reach an agreement because China and India sabotaged it, and rightly so. They want to develop their countries. So it was very, very embarrassing. So what they did in Paris, when they came to have the Paris Agreement signed in 2015, Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, they brought all the princes and the prime ministers and the presidents in at the start of the conference. Then they all flew out, made a big fanfare, got all the headlines, then made a big fanfare, and then flew out, and they left it to the bureaucrats to sort out. They couldn't get an agreement. The Paris Agreement is not really an agreement. What each country decided to do was to agree to doing whatever they wanted to do, and that's the Paris Agreement. So China is going to do nothing until 2050. India is going to do much the same. They're very, very coy about this. Australia, meanwhile, said we'll commit economic suicide and we'll legislate it. That's the Paris Agreement. It's not an agreement. It's rubbish. Last year, China began construction of 98 gigawatts of coal power. To put that in perspective, I can't get over this. It's just so bloody stupid. The entire national electricity market in Australia has 87 gigawatts of capacity. About 90% of China's mark. So in 1 year, China built more coal-fired power than the size of our entire energy grid. And they're continuing to do so, and they're heading for 5 billion tonnes of coal production. We are producing about 500 million, 1/10 of that. And they're going to keep doing that probably for the next 10 years. They've said that they will until they get their country developed. They look at the West and they look at our history since 1850 and the use of coal and oil and natural gas and uranium. And they say, you people developed your countries. You people gave your people high standards of living through hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil and natural gas. We want the same, and bugger you lot, we're going to do it. So, and they're going to keep doing that probably, as I said, for the next 10 years. I think it's going to be until 2050. Then they might think about cutting the use of coal. Once everything's built, our governments have been a complete bunch of fools. Actually, I'll go beyond. Our governments have been dishonest, incompetent fools. You know, when you build a power station, when you build a project, when you build a dam, when you build a factory, when you build a house, you have a plan for building it. You have a timeline to it. You coordinate the use of resources, the use of energy. But before building that house, before building that project, before building that power station, before, let alone committing to a whole redoing of the whole grid, you develop a business case. You look at the alternatives. You have a policy basis, you develop a business case, and then you go ahead and you have a plan with Gantt charts and you allocate the use of resources. There is no such plan for rewiring the whole of our electricity grid. No such plan. No such plan. We're walking off a cliff led by Chris Bowen blindfolded. But there's some good news. In Queensland, the state government is starting to give into reality. Almost, not quite. We'll quote from them. Coal and gas will remain a key part of Queensland's energy mix alongside renewables. After Premier David Crisafulli declared he would not dictate energy policy by ideology as the debate over net zero rages on. One nation sitting back saying, no net zero, it's disaster. The rest of them are ripping themselves apart over it. Liberals and Nationals are ripping themselves apart. Labor's just ripping the country apart, and the Greens are just insane. They're still giving into the woke crowd and maintaining their net zero targets though. So David Crisafulli is saying he's going to keep coal going as long as he can, but he's going to have net zero targets that he says he'll meet. You can't do both. You can't do both. You know, I remember going back to the New South Wales state election, the last state election there. The day of the election, that evening, Chris Minns accepted victory. His energy minister, I've forgotten her name, she came on and said, we've got to do something about a Raring power station. A Raring power station was scheduled to be shut early. She was quickly lining up from the very first night they came into power to keep the power station open. Now they're talking more about keeping it open for extended periods. There's no alternative. Solar and wind are not alternatives to coal. You need baseload power. You either want to keep the lights on by ditching net zero. There's only two options, I'm sorry. You either want to keep the lights on by ditching net zero, or you go for blackouts. That's it. So let's thank One Nation for telling the truth and applying political courage. All we're doing is making decisions based on data. So David Crisafulli said, we've got our emissions targeted. We're going to get there, and I have every confidence. In opposition, Mr. Crisafulli signed up to Labor's legislated emissions targets of 30% reduction by 2030 and 75% reduction by 2035 before reaching net zero in 2050. Hung by his own bloody words. There are only two options. I'll come back to those two options. You either want to keep the lights on or by ditching net zero, or you have a blackout. That's it. One Nation we can thank for telling the truth and applying the political pressure on David Crisafulli and on the Nationals and Liberals. On behalf of the people, we're applying that pressure. On behalf of small businesses, we're applying that pressure. On behalf of all employers, every single person who employs someone, we're putting pressure on the Nationals and Liberals to ease up on them to keep people in work. Or you keep net zero targets and get blackouts. That's as simple as it gets. And that is not just our forecast. That is what is happening overseas as we speak. Donald Trump knows that is reality. That's why he's stopping the construction of wind turbines and returning back to coal, back to gas, fracking, and back to nuclear. So what we need to do in Australia is build even more coal-fired power. Then we can cut the extension cord that New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, they're all decimating their economies, shutting down power stations, and they've plugged into Queensland coal plants. So we need to shut them off and just conduct business for our state. We'll have the cheapest power in the country in a year or so. It'll be more expensive because we're still building solar and wind, but it'll be cheaper than New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. The Western Australians must be looking at us and just going crazy, thinking this is nuts, but they're shutting down coal too. Let's see how solar and wind-powered states, South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales, go without reliable coal backing them up. The ACT proudly boasts, the ACT territory government boasts that it's 100% solar and wind. They don't tell everyone that they're plugged into the New South Wales grid, which is so the ACT is a little area within a large state of New South Wales relying upon coal and gas. Now let's go back onto unpleasant news. Dozens of refugees from Gaza touched down in Australia on Friday night to a high-level but quiet government welcome, a secret government welcome, igniting fierce debate over immigration, security and transparency. An exclusive Sky News report has revealed that a new cohort of Palestinian refugees was welcomed into Sydney from Gaza by Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke. This is the second time he's done it. The cohort that arrived on Friday night was met by an enthusiastic Mr. Burke, but a key point is that their arrival has been kept from the public, hidden, secret. Why? Why Tony Burke? Why Anthony Albanese? Do you hide these things? Migration agent Jamal Daoud, who recorded a video on their arrival, said the group was made up of immediate family members of Australian citizens, numbering, quote, up to 40 or 50 people. So journalist Chris Kenny on the Sky News questioned why the event was kept under wraps, noting the Gazans received, quote, a personalised, high-level government welcome, but strangely, no public or media announcement from the minister. They're ashamed. So the government forcibly deports less than 5% of the 100,000 illegal immigrants in this country, and that they know they've got 100,000 illegal immigrants in this country. They deport less than 5%, and then they secretly let in through a side door 10 times that number, almost 50 refugees from the Middle East. And again, with minimal vetting, we understand. How do you bring in people from a country where their leaders are saying, we want to kill Christians, openly stating, we want to kill Christians? And then they admitted last time they did around about an hour screening of people from Gaza coming in. The secrecy is because, surely, these ministers know that Australia does not want these new arrivals right now. I'll say it again. The number one duty of a government on its immigration policy is to protect the people already in the country. The number one duty is to the people already in the country, the people already here. So going back to this story, the secrecy is because they know Australia does not want these new arrivals right now. We don't want these new arrivals anytime, really, but during a crisis with a human catastrophe in our country with homelessness, come on. Where are these new refugees? There are hundreds of thousands of people in Australia homeless right now. Hundreds of thousands in what should be one of the world's richest countries. Where are these new refugees going to sleep? In a hotel? And who's going to pay for it? In a rental? And who's going to pay for it? In a bed that an Australian should be in? No wonder the government want to keep this secret. This is disgraceful. I'm going to leave you with a funny video. That's the weekly wrap for the only opposition party, the only party serving the Australian people, the only sensible party. I hope you enjoy your weekend. I'm going to leave you. What's the time? Got any time for questions?
We can yell about it if you want.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Senator Roberts. I heard today there was a $3 billion solar farm to be shut down next year. Cheap energy.
I heard that too. I can't remember where that was. Was it in Australia? So $3 billion solar farm. Can they hear your voice with that? A little bit. $3 billion solar farm. We never call them solar farms. Solar industrial complex to be shut down. There are also others in America being shut down now because they're not economic. This is what they're going to rely upon, and they'll keep subsidising. So the taxpayer is going to subsidise it, the electricity user is going to subsidise it, drives up the price of electricity, and manufacturers shut and send their manufacturing to China. This is insane.
Chinese Communist Party will continue to say one thing, then do whatever it wants.
That's right, and that's the mark of any totalitarian government. And did you notice that's what the mark of the Albanese coalition with the Greens? They do whatever they want. They've got an absolute majority in the Senate, and they've got an absolute majority in the House of Representatives. They can pass anything they want right through the Parliament. And they know that the people are upset about the mass migration devastating our country. They know that they're upset about high energy prices, but they're still relentlessly going along to UN and World Economic Forum policies. Did you vote for the UN? Did you vote for the World Economic Forum? I sure as hell didn't.
Is it true Mount Isa is struggling because of power prices?
Mount Isa is struggling because of power prices. Dropping power prices by giving them cheap electricity again will, and the, what's the name of the link? The copper string, that's right. Copper string coming in, that will make some benefit. That's a good project, although the cost has escalated dramatically since it was $2 billion. It's now heading for $5 billion, I think. But when Mount Isa gets cheaper power, it'll reduce the cut-off grade for ore mining, recoverable ore, and that will extend the life of the Mount Isa copper refining. Now, the other thing is that by having accessible power on tap in the flicker of a switch at Mount Isa, it'll open up surrounding areas to cheap electricity supply, and that will stimulate more development of mineral resources in that whole region in the northwest, and that will extend the life of Mount Isa.
Trent says, Dear Senator Roberts, should the ABC be sold if it is worth anything?
Would you buy it? We'd be hard-pressed getting a buyer, wouldn't we? I've said for quite a few years now, and so has Pauline, either sell it, or if you can't find a buyer, shut it, except for the regional towns where the radio network does a bloody good job, and they're pretty open. We need to shut down Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. Actually, we need to shut down everything except the rural areas where they provide a good service for farming communities, information on markets, and where they provide good information on disaster relief. But other than that, sell it, and if no one wants to buy it, shut it. Save the taxpayers more than $1 billion a year, and get rid of SBS while we're at it.
Lotto asks, are we paying for these immigrants like the USA and England?
I believe when the government first brings immigrants in, they do pay their accommodation. Depends on how they come in. If they're refugees, they certainly do. These are family assisted, so I don't know in this specific instance. Maybe they're going to be supported by the families already here. But we have got, regardless of who's paying for them, they're taking up a bed and they're taking up a roof that should be taken up by an Australian first. Until every Australian has a house, every Australian rather has a roof and a bed, then we should be not bringing in anyone at all, and we should deport 100,000 immediately and cut back on university students from overseas, because that is just a Ponzi scheme. They're coming here to work, many of them, and they're sending money home. $11 billion a year goes home to university student families. Some of them bring their families. This is a very, very serious issue. They're bringing their families as students, and then they're working.
That Conservative says Anthony Overseasy will be pushing digital ID soon, I guarantee it.
Pushing digital ID soon, and no, mate, he's already been pushing it. Started with Scott Morrison. He developed the bill, the Liberals, and then it was introduced by Anthony Albanese, and he's already introduced the bill. It's already in. And what they'll be working on next is to break their promise. We can see it coming now, breaking their promise that it would be voluntary. It will be made compulsory for various things. In Queensland, the state Labor government, the previous Labor government, actually made it compulsory for coal miners who are applying for jobs, if they did their medical screening tests, pass safe, to get the job, they have to show the health certificate, the medical certificate. They had to have a digital ID. That's happening increasingly.
Anthony says, is it true the government is bringing in more immigrants to build the 1 million houses for the housing crisis?
That's what they say, that they're bringing in construction workers, but of the construction workers who came in, only 0.6% were construction workers. Of the migrants who came in, only 0.6% were construction workers. So what we've got is 0.6% of people building houses for the other 99.4%. This is bullshit, mate. This is absolute nonsense. It's just lies. And then every year, Anthony Albanese has said he will keep record immigration until we catch up with pre-COVID levels. When he started his term, there was at pre-COVID levels. It was already above pre-COVID levels. It's now soaring above pre-COVID levels. And then every year since, he said, next year we'll cut it. And the next year, it was bumped up higher again, another new record. So you can't trust these people.
Johnny says the Communist Chinese Party can never be trusted. Rescind the Darwin Port lease now.
That's right. Where was it recently? We saw that the Prime Minister refused to say that they would. Oh, that's right. When it was meeting with President Xi Jinping, that he didn't take up with the president the cancellation of the Darwin Port lease. So that's, it's just, and that was signed off on by the Liberal Party. So both sides are playing this game. Both sides are pushing high immigration. The Prime Minister that started high immigration, mass migration, doubled the migration rates in his term, was John Howard. The person who started renewable energy targets, John Howard. National electricity market, John Howard. Stealing farmers' property rights to comply with the UN's Kyoto Climate Protocol, John Howard. Liberal National Party has introduced every major climate and energy bill, every major climate and energy policy from the start. They're the first ever policy on having a carbon dioxide tax and emissions trading scheme. We need the people of Australia to wake up. You're being scammed by a Liberal Labor Party. Liberals are blue, Labor Party is red. I think we'll start calling them the Purple Party. That's what you get when you mix red and blue, purple. And it's the same in the United States. These things that we're talking about that are devastating us from the uni party's perspective, mass immigration, energy, stealing of property rights, woke agenda, they're global. The censorship bills, they're global. We've got them now advertising them, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, advertising it, promoting it. These are global. And you've got a purple party in power in every one of the major democracies. Canada, you've got red and blue pretending to be opposition. They're merged together, they're purple. Same in the USA, purple and red. Except, fortunately, Trump is not a member of the Uni Party because he's an outlier. So that's good. Britain, purple. New Zealand, purple. And so on it goes.
Zane says the government allows Australia's natural resources to be stolen from us for almost nothing, at the same time raising and creating new taxes.
Correct. And 90% of Australia's large companies, these figures coming from Jim Kalali in 1996 and 2010. He was former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Taxation for large companies and international matters. He said 90% of Australia's large companies are foreign-owned and since 1953 have paid little or no tax. That was due to a Liberal Party government under Menzies. They enacted that as law. Bob Hawke, as Labor Party Prime Minister,
in the 1980s, enacted the Petroleum Rent Resources Tax that made it possible for most producers of natural gas, our natural gas, sent overseas, to not pay any tax and to pay hardly anything in royalties. That is what's happening. And so that means the majority of our income to run the country comes from taxpayers, you and I. And we're subsidising these foreign parasites to come in here and steal our resources and get mozza for them and not pay anything at all. Okay, that'll be it for now. So I'm going to leave you with this funny video. France's President Emmanuel Macron was left blocked from getting to the United Nations in New York after President Trump's motorcade left the streets cut off. So they had to block off the streets for Trump's motorcade to go through. Macron was on the edge of one of the blocked off streets, and he decided that he would have to call the President of the United States and tell him that his motorcade blocked him off. And I think you can't hear it on this video, but there are 2 points from this. First of all, Albo said that Trump doesn't have a mobile. Can you remember that? So tell me whether or not President Trump has a mobile when you finish watching Macron talking with him. But the other thing is, apparently Trump's answer to Macron was, well, walk. So there you go. Enjoy the video.
Who's this? How many people?
No, I have 10 people with me. I go to the French embassy.
No. I'm sorry, President. I'm really sorry. It's just that everything's in frozen right now. There's a motorcade coming late. That's why. I'm sorry.
If you don't see it, let me cross. I negotiate with you.
No, this is not that.
How are you? Guess what? I'm waiting in the street because everything is frozen for you.
Are you sorry? That's because I one good thing you gotta go. So.
I don't know, it's still 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But I would love if we can. Yeah, I know, I will follow. But you know, after I would love if we can have a short discussion with Qatar and you on the situation in Gaza, because